Your past doesn't matter. I know, that sentence alone probably annoyed you a little. Because if your past truly didn't matter, you wouldn't still think about it at night. You wouldn't replay old conversations in your head. You wouldn't feel that quiet heaviness when everything around you goes silent. So let's be honest with each other, just for this moment. Your past feels like it matters. It feels loud. It feels close. It feels like it's sitting right beside you, reminding you of everything you wish you had done differently. And that's not weakness. That's memory. Most people think being stuck in the past means you're lazy, unmotivated, or refusing to move forward. But that's not what's happening to you. What's actually happening is this. You cared deeply. You tried. You invested yourself fully into people, decisions, dreams, and versions of life that didn't turn out the way you hoped. And when something costs you that much emotionally, your mind doesn't just let it go. Your brain isn't holding on to the past to punish you. It's holding on to it because it's trying to protect you from making the same mistake again. That's why the memories come back at night. That's why they show up when you're tired. That's why they appear when you finally slow down. Your mind says, "Don't forget this. Remember how much this hurt." But here's where something subtle goes wrong. Instead of learning from the past, you start living inside it. You don't just remember what happened. You start measuring yourself by it. You think, if I had chosen differently, if I had spoken sooner, if I hadn't trusted them, if I hadn't wasted that time, and slowly, without realizing it, your past stops being a lesson and starts becoming an identity. You stop saying, "That happened to me," and start thinking, "That's who I am." And that's the moment the past becomes heavy. Not because it exists, but because you keep dragging it into every new moment. You meet new people while carrying old disappointments. You make new plans while remembering old failures. You want change, but your nervous system is still braced for loss. So you hesitate. You delay. You stay quiet when you should speak. You stay when you should leave. You leave when you should stay. And then you blame yourself again. Here's something no one tells you. Most people don't ruin their future because of their past mistakes. They ruin it because they never forgive themselves for surviving them. You survived situations that required versions of you that don't exist anymore. You made choices with the information, emotional capacity, and awareness you had at that time. But now you judge those choices with the clarity you only gained after going through them. That's not fair, but it's human. And the cost of that self-judgment is enormous. It shows up as chronic emotional exhaustion, fear of starting again, the feeling that you're behind everyone else. You're not broken. You're overloaded with unresolved meaning. You're carrying old interpretations that no longer apply to the person you are now. Think about this quietly. If your past truly defined you, you wouldn't feel discomfort about it anymore. Pain means growth happened. Regret means awareness changed. Nostalgia means you cared. People who never evolve don't wrestle with their past. They repeat it without reflection. You, on the other hand, feel the weight because you're no longer the same person. And that's where the shift begins. Your past doesn't matter in the way you think it does. It doesn't decide your worth. It doesn't limit your intelligence. It doesn't cancel your future. What does matter is the relationship you now have with your past. Do you use it as a weapon against yourself? Or as a reference point that shows how far your awareness has come? Because there's a huge difference between remembering and reliving, between learning and punishing. And right now, if we're being honest, you've been punishing yourself for a very long time. Not loudly, quietly. You function. You show up. You smile when needed. But inside, there's a subtle belief whispering, "Maybe I missed my chance. Maybe I should have been further by now. Maybe my best version already passed. That belief doesn't come from truth. It comes from exhaustion. And exhaustion makes time feel shorter than it really is. Here's something important you need to hear before we continue. Your past only has power when you keep asking it for permission. Permission to try again. Permission to trust again. Permission to feel hopeful again. And it was never meant to have that authority. But let's slow this down. Because before you can let go of the past, you need to understand why you're holding on to it so tightly. You don't actually want to erase your past. If you did, you wouldn't still think about it with this much intensity. What you really want is relief. Relief from the constant replay. Relief from the quiet self-blame. Relief from feeling like every step forward is somehow late. And here's the truth that changes everything. You're not holding on to the past because you're weak. You're holding on to it because you're unfinished with the meaning you gave it. At the time, you told yourself stories to survive. You said, "It happened because I wasn't good enough. I lost them because I waited too long. I failed because I didn't try hard enough. Others moved on because something is wrong with me." Those stories weren't facts. They were coping mechanisms. Your mind needed a reason, any reason, to make sense of pain. So it chose explanations that gave you control, even if they hurt. Because believing it was my fault feels safer than believing. Sometimes things fall apart for reasons you can't control. Control feels safer than uncertainty. But those survival stories were never meant to become permanent beliefs. They were scaffolding, not the building. And now, years later, you're still living inside explanations that no longer fit who you are. That's why nothing feels aligned anymore. You've grown, but your inner narrative hasn't caught up. You're trying to live a new chapter using language from an old one, and it creates tension everywhere. You hesitate before starting something new because you're afraid of repeating history. You downplay your hopes because disappointment feels familiar. You tell yourself you're being realistic, but deep down you know it's fear wearing a reasonable mask. Here's something gentle but important. Your past does not disqualify you, it trained you. Not in obvious ways. Not in ways people applaud, but in quiet ways. You learned boundaries the hard way. You learned discernment through pain. You learned empathy by being hurt. You learned resilience without ever being celebrated for it. Those lessons don't show up on timelines or resumes. But they live inside how you see, choose, and respond now. The problem isn't that your past exists. The problem is that you keep asking your past to tell you who you are today. And it can't. Because the version of you who made those choices doesn't exist anymore. That person had different fears, different information, different emotional capacity, different needs. Judging that version of you with your current awareness is like blaming a child for not knowing what adulthood would demand. It makes no sense, yet we do it constantly. You don't need to forgive your past self dramatically. You don't need closure conversations. You don't need to heal everything. You need to update the meaning. Instead of saying, "That mistake ruined my path," you begin saying, "That experience changed how I choose now." Instead of, "I wasted time," you say, "I learned what doesn't work for me." Instead of, "I should be further," you say, "I'm moving at a pace that doesn't destroy me." That shift is subtle, but it's powerful. Because when the meaning changes, the emotional weight loosens. And here's something most people miss. Letting go of the past doesn't mean forgetting it. It means stopping the habit of using it as evidence against yourself. You don't need to prove you've suffered enough. You don't need to punish yourself to stay accountable. You don't need to carry regret to show growth. Growth is already visible in how carefully you move now, in how aware you are, in how deeply you reflect, in how much you want to live differently. People who are truly lost don't question their direction. They repeat patterns without awareness. You're not lost. You're transitioning. And transitions are uncomfortable because they happen between identities. You're no longer who you were, but you haven't fully stepped into who you're becoming. That in-between space feels empty, confusing, and lonely, but it's not failure. It's recalibration. And this is the part no one prepares you for. You don't move forward by confidence. You move forward by permission. Permission to begin imperfectly. Permission to hope without guarantees. Permission to trust yourself, again, slowly. Your future doesn't require you to erase your past. It requires you to stop living as if you're still there. You don't need a new personality. You don't need massive change. You don't need motivation. You need one quiet decision. I'm allowed to move forward without fully understanding everything. That's it. From there, things shift naturally. You stop explaining yourself so much. You stop rushing clarity. You stop forcing certainty before action. And something surprising happens. Life starts responding to you differently, not because you changed the world, but because you stopped fighting yourself. Your past didn't ruin you. It refines you. But refinement only helps when you stop treating it like damage. So if you take anything from this, let it be this. Your past doesn't matter as a verdict. It matters only as context. And context is information, not identity. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You're just finally ready to live without dragging old meaning into new moments. And that's not weakness. That's the beginning of peace.